unfortunately, there are a whole lot of folks that aren't doing anything. And I think that's what's really bringing us down as a society is we've got a lot of dead weight, so to speak, and a lot of kind of untapped potential, right? You could look at it negatively and say you're a lot of people sitting on their ass, or you could look at it as untapped potential. And that's my belief, is if you could get all that brain power and all that, even just arm power, kind of headed in the right direction to do good in the world, man, I think we'd be unstoppable as a people.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Let's Give a Damn podcast. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Nick Laparra. Welcome. It is a very hot day in Nashville, which is something that I don't really have to say, I guess, anytime between spring and autumn. There is no spring here, in case you were wondering. We moved here in the fall, and there's no spring here. It went right from kind of a pretty dreary, sad winter to 80-degree days with 90% humidity pretty quickly. So we're not super thrilled about that, but I'm making the best of it by drinking a delicious cup of hot coffee, which I always do when it's hot outside. That's how I cope, is I drink hot coffee, and it's an amazing combination. Before we get into my guest this week, who is amazing, he's amazing, I'm so excited to introduce you to him. I just wanted to update you because for the past few weeks, I've been telling you about the World Vision 6K for Water that I was leading here in Nashville. Well, it happened this past weekend. We did it. 44,000 people around the world on 1,100 sites walked for water. 44,000 people at least ensured that 44,000 other people around the world will never have to need water again. Every $50 contribution, which was the race registration fee, gives lasting water to one person in need where World Vision is working, and I trust World Vision. I love World Vision. So excited about the work they were doing. So I led a 6K for Water here in Nashville, and it was amazing. It was so much fun. The people were amazing. The walk was amazing. My 6-year-old daughter joined me. It was truly the least we could do for so many people around the world that can't go into their home, turn on the faucet, turn on the shower, flush the toilet. They can't do these things that you and I take for granted. And cool thing, we hit our 1,500 goal. We not only hit it, we surpassed it. I think as of right now, 1,575. So I'm very grateful for the people that gave to our race, to our walk. We reached our goal. We're so thrilled. And lastly, you can still give. Every $50 gives lasting water to one person in need. You can still give at worldvision.letsgiveadamn.com. But I wanted to update you because so many of you have asked about it and I've posted about it a ton. So I wanted to kind of give you a concluding bit of information on it. It happened. We did it. It was a success. And we're so thrilled and excited about doing it again next year. My guest today is Kevin Brown. Kevin is the CEO and co-founder of Mighty Ally. They're a one-part strategy consultant, one-part marketing agency, all parts maximizing capacity for impact. Kevin and I talked all the way from his home in Kampala, Uganda. We met at 2 p.m. my time, Central Standard Time, which was 10 p.m. his time. So grateful that he even chose to get on the call with me so we could record our conversation. You're gonna love Kevin. In our conversation, we talk adoption. We talk doing hard things. We talk moving to hard places because of decisions that we're making and things that we're seeing. We talk what they get to do as a marketing agency, as a strategy agency. They get to do so much incredible work because of their skill set and their experience. And it was just a thrilling conversation. I'm so excited for you to hear it. So without further ado, get ready, buckle up for my conversation with Kevin Brown, CEO and co-founder of Mighty Ally. Let's go. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, thanks, Nick. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Fantastic. Thanks for joining me. Where are you in the world right now?
I am in Kampala, Uganda.
Kampala, Uganda, and that's home for you.
It is, yeah.
And so you are staying up late for us today. So thank you so much for joining us at such a late hour.
Yeah, that's the way I roll. I try to keep one leg here in Africa and the other in the States to try to do business in both places at once.
I love it. Well, we'll get more into that here in a minute. What I'd love to do here at the beginning, though, is you've got this team that you run and this organization you lead, Mighty Ally. We're going to get into all that here in a few minutes. We're also going to figure out why the hell you live in Uganda and not in the U.S. We're going to get into that. But what I'd love to start with is give us some context, give us some background, some backdrop for your life. What are the people, the places, the things that made you who you are today? Just go back as far as you want to, and kind of whatever pops up in your head, just give us some context for what are the things that made you who you are today.
Yeah, I guess it has to start with parents, right? Grew up just a pretty normal upbringing in Alabama. Had parents that loved us and gave us plenty of opportunity and instilled hard work and definitely taught us the difference between right and wrong. What's interesting is looking back on life and where I am today. I didn't grow up with exposure to hardship or volunteering or international awareness. Heck, we didn't even really travel outside of, maybe the states bordering Alabama, but that was pretty much just a typical upbringing. And so, yeah, between that and then going to school in Louisiana and then living in Austin, Texas for a while, I mean, that was life before we moved to Nashville. And I think things started to change once we moved to Nashville in terms of the trajectory of life. And I married a girl from our hometown, and that's kind of life in a nutshell.
So where in Alabama did you grow up? What city specifically?
It's called Huntsville, and it's a pretty international city for Alabama. Alabama gets a bad rap. Some of it deserved, some of it undeserved, but Huntsville's a more progressive city. It's got a lot of automotive industry and NASA from different parts of the world, and so you get a lot of transplants coming into Huntsville, and that's where I grew up.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the statistics something like some of the smartest people in the country live there because of all the rocket, space, science stuff that's going on?
Yeah, totally. I think it was actually U.S. News and World Report just named it. World Reports just named it the seventh best city to live in America, and yeah, due to NASA and just I think it's outside of Silicon Valley and the Research Triangle in North Carolina. It's one of the biggest research hubs, and so it's surprising. People always say you don't sound like you're from Alabama and you don't act like you're from Alabama, and I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but it's definitely due to where we grew up was a little bit different than some of the surroundings.
You noted a few seconds ago that some of the things that people conjure up in their heads and their minds when they think of the South, some of it's deserved, some of it's not. Did you realize kind of some of those things growing up? Did you see some of those things? And I guess I'm referring to just kind of in some ways, some antiquated thinking, some racism, those sorts of things. Was that part of your growing up years, or were you kind of secluded from it because of being in Huntsville?
No, it was definitely all around. I've got family actually my parents were from very small towns in Alabama, and unfortunately there are beliefs that were just ingrained in folks like my parents and others in the family. I mean, just really otherwise good people that might have grown up with beliefs that are kind of counter to what we might otherwise believe today. And so, yeah, growing up as a kid, I remember vividly just the first time I was old enough to hear the N word and know that it was offensive, and it was just used in passing at an auto body shop. My parents' car was in the shop, and the owner turned around and said it to the kid's face. He said, "Hey, N boy, go get the car." And he wasn't being derogatory. He was just calling him that because that's what he called him. And I remember being old enough to be bothered by it, but obviously not old enough to do something about it. And so, memories like that were definitely pretty common growing up.
My family and I have been in Nashville for a few months now, and we've noticed that definitely here in Nashville, it's a lot more progressive than other parts of the South even are today. But even so, the other day my kids were playing with a little girl in the front yard, and her great grandmother watches her 3 houses down, and her dad came over and introduced himself to me and was coming over to make sure his daughter was playing fairly and everything. And so we started talking. And within 30 seconds, and I kid you not, I'm not lying, within 30 seconds of shaking his hand and introducing myself with his name, he said the N-word. Like within 30 seconds, and he was describing the area of town that he lives in, and he called it, it's N-town. And it's like a mile from my house, this place where he lives. And I just thought, we have not encountered a lot of that here in Nashville proper, but to realize that that's still very much a way of speaking for a lot of people. It's a way of life for a lot of these people that they still think, and it's so front of mind, in front of like tongue for them, that within 30 seconds of meeting a complete stranger, they think it's okay to like drop that. These are not their homies that they're like hanging with, at the house. This is like a complete stranger.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's what's crazy about it is in retrospect. I mean, again, I don't want to try to defend the actions or the behavior, but a lot of the folks that use some of those words, I mean, it's just what they're taught, and it's just how you grow up. And I mean, I know cousins say, we actually, there's one example of interracial marriage in my family, which is otherwise really. I don't know if taboo is the right word, but I mean, there's just, you hear people talk about things, and that it's not there's nothing wrong with them, or their heart's not dark. It's just the way that they're brought up, and I was brought up the same way. I mean, it's hard to admit, but today I can sit here and say that I was racist at one point in my life, and even maybe as recently as 10 or 15 years ago, and we all, I think, have it, right? And so I think it's one of the first steps is just being able to admit it, and to understand what racism is, and understand what privilege is. I mean, hell, that's another subject. This idea of privilege. I even as recently as 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, I would have said, like, I'm not privileged. I worked hard to get where I got. And then the last couple of years was kind of just one of those, holy shit, yes, I'm privileged, and I need to admit that, because the first step is learning about it and admitting it and coming to grips with it, and then you can start changing not only your behaviors but those around you, hopefully.
Yeah, you're spot on. Fantastic. We all have a little bit of it in us, and you're right. The first step is being honest about it, and then working out those kinks in our life, working out the areas of untruth that we've been told or that we've been telling ourselves. Yeah, great advice. So you said you grew up, you're kind of a racist kid, and that you've come a long way since then. Kind of take me through the next few years. Where did you go to college? What were the kind of things that happened in your life that brought you? Take me up from where you left off until just prior to like Mighty Ally. Let's go through that next part of your life.
Sure. Yeah. So I was kind of an underachieving kid in high school, to tell you the truth. And then, funny enough, after just being probably a C or B grade kid in high school, I walked onto the college campus at LSU, Louisiana State, and just set an audacious goal, because that's what I do in life. And I said, I'm not going to make anything but A's in college. And I think my parents chuckled a little bit, but I came pretty darn close to it. I think I made 2 B's or something like that. And so, I was a pretty high achiever in college. Ran the school newspaper, part of Leadership LSU, just whatever, did what I could, partied quite a bit as well, just formed a lot of great friendships. And it's still funny to think about where I am now. In college, I had no inkling of international exposure or awareness of just poverty or hardship. I mean, I did nothing in college in terms of volunteerism, or I wasn't involved in any sort of international student unions. I mean, I was just pretty average, hardworking white college kid that drank a whole lot of beer and then studied really hard, and then just 4 years later I moved to Austin, Texas, right after college.
What happened from college through, when did you get married and all of this, start to think about a family and all of that?
Yeah, so married a few years after college, still with a high school sweetheart, lived in Austin, Texas, and I had a great run through the 20s. We were actually just talking about it today. Today's our 14th wedding anniversary. And
oh, wow, congrats.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm on a podcast with you, Nick, so that's how I spent my anniversary.
I'm so sorry. I deeply apologize.
No, my wife's asleep and I'm on a podcast, so that's how awesome it gets when you're 14 years in. I think it's like gold and silver and all these different analogies, and then 14 years is wife asleep and you're on a podcast. I think
perfect. I'll remember that. I'm 4 years away from that.
Yeah. Married a few years in, lived in Texas, worked in the ad industry, ended up with a dream job. I ran marketing and brand activation for music, sports, and live events. Just kind of cool gig where I got to work with some awesome music festivals and celebrities. And then, I moved to Nashville, honestly, to get closer to family in Alabama. At that point, some family had started to age, and just realized that, hey, if we do start a family one day, we want to be closer. And in retrospect, it's funny that we moved 2 hours from family, and then now we're 8,000 miles away. But moved closer and lived in Nashville. Worked in the in the music industry for a while. That was actually my first taste of starting a business. Was the company I worked for. Crazy enough, we moved to Nashville, and it was actually my anniversary. Funny enough, 10 years ago today that. We had moved to Nashville and settled into this company, and then Ticketmaster bought the company and decided to shut it down. So about 100 people were laid off overnight. And again, one of those just, oh crap, what have we done moments. We picked up and moved away from a city we loved. We took a job. But the really awesome silver lining out of that experience was that I was essentially forced into starting a business with a couple of the guys from that company. And I had no inklings of starting a business. We were late 20s. My wife had her own business, and we didn't really have a high risk profile, but we were kind of forced into it. And that was my first taste of entrepreneurship. And I'm so glad it happened the way it did, because I don't think I could take a day job like I used to for anything now.
Tell me about your family makeup, your kids. I know there's some international adoption mixed in there, which led to you guys being where you are today. Give me some insight into that. I know there was also some, I don't think we talked about this during our first chat, but I think there's failed adoption in your history as well as there is in our family story. So take me through some of that adoption stuff, because adoption is very near to my heart and probably near to the heart of a lot of people listening. So yeah, what has adoption meant to you guys, and kind of how's that played out in your lives?
Yeah, it's a great question. People ask, how did we get started with adoption? And funny enough, we were in our early 30s, didn't know if we were going to have kids or not. We'd kind of tried, but kind of not. And we were just living the good life of being dual income, no kids. And we were big documentary fans. Funny enough, people ask how it started, and I think we just randomly picked a documentary about the lost girls of China, and just really documenting the plight of the one-child policy and how the culture there really favors boys instead of girls. And so you see so many girls just literally abandoned in parks or in sewer drains or whatever. And so we watched that documentary, and it was kind of one of those just sparks that the spark was lit, and then we started exploring it more. And once our eyes were open to it, we just very quickly realized, all right, this is something we want to do something about. So our first adoption was in China in 2014, and we were pretty naive to the orphan crisis and the whole all the causes that led up to it. But I think I might have told you this the first time we chatted. We brought our daughter into our family on a Monday, and on a Wednesday, we in China visited the orphanage that she grew up in, and just saw rooms and rooms full of babies laying in their beds, and it's quite wild. It's the babies are motionless; they're not making a sound. They've essentially learned not to cry because nobody's going to come. The nannies are doing the best they can, but they're dealing with just hundreds and hundreds of babies. And so, in that moment, my wife and I just we're sobbing. We're holding our first daughter in our arms, but we're just sobbing. And Mark Twain has a quote. He says, "The two most important days of your life are the day you were born and then the day you found out why." And for me, that was the day that I found out why I was living, and that was to do something about it. And so we sat there in tears in our daughter's orphanage and said, we're going to do something about this one day. And so that was the beginning of really, I would say, what ripped our hearts open in terms of just seeing the hardship for the first time and kind of weaving the story back together, thinking about growing up and thinking about college and even starting businesses in the past. It was a pretty good life, right? And then you see this kind of hardship firsthand, and you see what poverty and desperation can do. And with our daughter in particular, she had a medical special need, and she was left with a hospital note and a little Buddha necklace around her neck on the doorsteps of the orphanage. And so, we believe and know in our hearts that her mom and or parents really loved her, and that they were in a desperate place and were forced to give her up. And so, that family day actually just happened three days ago. Was our 4-year anniversary of being with our daughter. And, every family day we take a picture to replicate the first one we took together. And then we light a candle and think about China Mom and just kind of say a prayer of gratitude for what she went through to give us such a bundle of joy. So yeah, that was the beginning of that.
Man, that's a crazy story. Wow. And now take me through from that moment to Uganda, right? Because you're there as a result of more adoption stuff, right?
Yeah, right. This is where life just kind of picks you up and takes you by the hand at times and kicks your ass at times.
Yeah.
But, at that point we were just again, hearts ripped open and minds racing around not only the desperation we saw in the world, but also just what do we do about this? And we felt like, in particular, the orphan crisis was something we were passionate about, and we just wanted to explore more. We knew that a lot of African countries had quite a desperate orphan crisis, and we didn't know anything at the time, but we just wanted to do something about it. And in hindsight, I don't know that we would have jumped straight to adoption because, as I sit here today, I believe and we've seen that adoption should be really a last resort for children. They deserve to grow up in their home countries and hopefully with some sort of family. In China, it's different because it's illegal to give up a child. So with our daughter, she was abandoned, much like every child there, and there's no tracing really any sort of family. But in these African countries, most of the time these kids that are in orphanages have family, and so. But we set out doing what we thought we could do about the situation, and we set out to adopt again. And no sugarcoating it. We came into a difficult environment here in Uganda, and the process took about a year before we were supposed to even be matched. We had one failed adoption with a match about 24 hours before we were supposed to fly. The case fell through with that little girl. And then 3 months later, we got here and landed and spent about 2 months with another little girl. And then that case fell through. And, of course, people say, I'm so sorry. And it wasn't about us at that point. It was about seeing just more desperation and more children that just deserved some sort of family. And so, long story longer, we had 2 more cases at that particular orphanage that had fallen through. We lived next door for 5 months, shared a fence with these children, just fell in love with them. I mean, we're with them every single day, and, we're there for their, blood, sweat, and tears and laughter and joys and also their pains. And unfortunately, after about 5 months living there, we had to move on because it was just a bad situation. And we realized that if we wanted to continue this journey, we were going to have to start over and start elsewhere.
What is it specifically about the Ugandan culture and the politics around adoption that it kept falling through and it took so long? What was going on there? Because I know it's obviously hard all around. I mean, our failed adoption was right here in the U.S., but what specifically was happening there that it just took months and months and fall through, and then another one, what was going on there?
Yeah, it's a question we get all the time. I mean, the number one question is, why is adoption so expensive, and why does it take so long when there are so many children? I mean,
right.
By some estimates, there are 147 million orphans in the world, and that number is slightly misleading because that counts kids that might have lost one or both parents but living with grandparents. But still, there are millions of kids that need families. That's unquestionable. And in countries like Uganda, man, where do we start, right? Post-colonialism, there was just there's civil war, there's a lack of education, there's poverty, there's just systems that were never put in place. There's government corruption. I mean, there's just so much to it that led to just some not only impoverished situations and desperate families, but just systems not being there to deal with kids when they do fall on these tough times. And so, for us in particular, we're actually grateful that a couple of the cases fell through in some ways, and then in other ways we're still heartbroken at the loss that these children face. I say grateful because some of these kids, in hindsight, had family, and not to get too deep into it, but we believe now that if a child has a family, that's where they belong, and we as Americans, as Westerners, as those who want to give a damn, to jump straight into it, we should be enabling more families to stick together. And if those families can't stick together, and there's no families for the kids, even with extended families, then in-country foster parents or in-country adoption, and only then should an American couple come in and swoop in and take an African child into their family, because otherwise all adoption starts with loss, and if you take a kid out of their homeland, I mean, that's just further loss on them. So yeah, that's our belief. And in our case, some cases fell through just because there was family, and family was coming, kind of stepping up and realizing what was going on. And in some cases trying to do what was right. And in some cases, I think just maybe seeing some dollar signs. And so, yeah, it was just a messy situation.
So part of your story, which you kind of just alluded to it, is, as a part of one of your beliefs, is that you are in Uganda now because you don't want to take that child out of their homeland, out of their home. That's pretty radical by anyone's standards, right? Because lots of kids, leave these third world and underserved countries, and they go back to UK and to Australia and to and to America. And yeah, you're uprooting these children away from everything they've ever known, and then expecting them to acclimate to a completely new, different country and culture and society. And you guys said, we're not doing that. Like, that's pretty radical. Like, what? So you actually do believe what you just said, and you're doing it in a way that, like, no, we're going to live here in Uganda for now, forever?
Yeah, well, that's the big question. If our parents weren't listening, I might answer it more directly. But yeah, I mean, it's for now, right? So number one, I mean, so we did finally really end up with a case after really being selective about the type of adoption we would pursue. We drew the line and said that if these children have families, that they're not orphans in our minds, and we can do something to help them get reinstituted back into their families. But if there are some children that truly have no other choice, like, right, there's no local foster families, there's no local adoptive families. If that does truly present itself, then we would be open to not only fostering but adopting. And that's essentially what we've been doing the last year. Is two little girls are with us in our family now, and they had been abandoned, and there's no trace of family, and nobody has been willing to take them in, and so we're taking them in, and they're still not fully adopted. And so as of now, we actually don't have a choice. They don't really even exist on paper in terms of a birth certificate or passport. And so we can't even cross the Ugandan borders with them. So for now, we live in Uganda, and they're with us. And I think we'll decide what the future holds. But it's definitely not going to be just rushing back to American norms of access and just uprooting them out of everything they've known, especially from the older one that's 6 going on 7. I think it would be pretty dangerous to just throw her in another environment without a really thoughtful process.
That's craziness. I love it. I mean, I know it's not easy what you're describing, this life you're describing, but I love the kind of the heart behind it. Let's talk Mighty Ally. So the work that you're doing, because this is one of the reasons that I got connected to you through our mutual friend, Tim. And yeah, let's talk Mighty Ally. And I want to get to, after we talk about this, I have a couple questions that I want to dig into for a few minutes around social enterprise work, for-profit, nonprofit, that sort of thing. For anyone listening that wants to head this direction, I think you've probably got some really good advice and experience in this that we can share. Before we get there, though, describe what you're doing so people can get kind of an idea of, what is Mighty Ally? Why do you exist? What do you hope to see happen?
Yeah, great question, and good job weaving the whole story together. We were here in Uganda, and we were actually still living next to the orphanage that I described earlier. I had been a partner in a marketing firm in Nashville, and due to the unforeseen delays in our process, I had started working remotely. I thought I was just going to be taking a couple months off and heading back to America with our new little girl. And obviously life took another direction. And so I started working remotely from this guest house next to the orphanage. And it was quite crazy because just like right now, it's about 10 o'clock here and 2 o'clock there in the central time zone. And I would be doing a video call with my team back in Nashville. And I'm talking to a conference room full of bright people, and we're using technology and big budgets to solve problems for brands. And then literally right outside my window, there are people that are suffering, right? It was night after night that no joke, the power would go out in this entire slum. And the only light for a mile around would be the blue screen of my laptop. And it just hit me, just that this is crazy, right? I'm on a video conference with great people, and there's nothing wrong with those people, but we're solving problems for brands, and we're doing this great strategy and marketing work. And then outside my window, I mean, I have more light than a lot of people do right now because of my business conference call. So it was just a level of disparity that we weren't comfortable with. And that's really what sparked the conversation between my wife, who's a co-founder in Mighty Ally, and then Kathleen, who, funny enough, was on the other end of that conference call. She was a partner in the same business. And the three of us just started talking. And instead of starting a mission ourselves to do something about the desperation we saw, or instead of just starting another nonprofit, what we realized that we could do to best kind of just help the world, so to speak, is that we could use the skills that we had honed over the course of our careers. I mean, we had been strategy professionals and marketing professionals. We had run businesses. We had worked with hundreds of clients across multiple industries and all different shapes and sizes. And so what we realized we should do is do what we've been doing our whole careers, but instead of serving just publicly traded brands or for-profit brands, serve those in the social sector, serve change makers, serve those that are on the front lines doing the world's most important work, whether they're a nonprofit or a social enterprise, and give them the kind of agency and consultancy and the same kind of services that the big dogs can afford. And so that was the impetus of it all, was honestly just night after night of power outages and being on conference calls with my team in Nashville and just realizing there's something wrong with this picture and there's something we can do about it.
So what kinds of projects have you worked on? Like what have you seen happen as a result of you pursuing this dream of Mighty Ally? So far, I know, you're still building it. It has a lot to grow, obviously. But yeah, kind of what have you seen happen so far?
So our focus is really, we describe it as we're a one-part consultancy, like a strategy consultancy, and we're also one-part marketing agency. And we work with what we call underserved change makers. So we, instead of going after the big nonprofits and the big social enterprises, we're not trying to work with Habitat for Humanity or Red Cross, or we're not trying to work with Tom's Shoes. I mean, we're working with smaller organizations that lack the ability to do the work that we do. And there's some pretty staggering stats out there. Like 1/3 of all nonprofits and social enterprises operate in the zone of insolvency. I mean, they're just literally trying to get the bills paid. And you see it every day. These nonprofits are started by a person with a passion, or maybe they're being run by experts in the field, but they're not necessarily business owners or business entrepreneurs. They don't necessarily have those skills, nor do they have the team to do the right strategy and marketing that we're just used to in the private sector. So our work is to really enable them to fulfill their missions and visions. And in the first year, we've served, I believe, 8 different clients and serving in about 6 different countries. So a couple of nonprofits here in Uganda, one in Kenya, one that was working in Colombia, an orphan care organization out of Mexico and Honduras. I mean, really, what we say is we serve any change maker that's fighting for basic human needs. So whether that's poverty, hunger, health, education, equality, or water, that's where we play, and we give them the kind of agency that the big dogs can afford.
So obviously, if a nonprofit leader or a team of nonprofit leaders, if they're living paycheck to paycheck, as it were, if they're essentially like just months or weeks away from going under, the pressure of that is going to prevent them from being effective, from doing the work they're called to do, right?
Yeah.
And so talk to those listening that may want to start a nonprofit, or they may have this vision, this problem they want to tackle, this evil they want to eradicate, something that they want to do, right? Talk me through the difference. Like, and obviously this is your opinion, right? It's an informed opinion, but this is your opinion. But give us your case for, should they start a nonprofit? Should they start a social enterprise business? Should they try to start a for-profit business that makes as much money as possible so that they can use those resources for good? Like, how should they go about this? And obviously, again, this is opinion, everyone that's listening. Like, you do what you need to do what you feel called to do. But I think there is some wisdom we can learn from what Kevin is going to tell us right now, and from my 15 years in nonprofit work, where we literally it was a shit show most of the time. We were just trying to keep up, trying to not go broke, leaving us pretty ineffective in the work that we were doing. So yeah, give me your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, the easy answer is don't go start a nonprofit tomorrow. I mean, funny enough, part of our model is we're a hybrid, nonprofit social enterprise hybrid, but we did a lot of thinking and research, and we had done a lot of volunteering in the space, and we had done advising social enterprises and nonprofits and been on boards and whatnot. And I think the common knee jerk is that someone gets passionate about something and they start a nonprofit, and that's something that's crippling the space. Is there are so many similar nonprofits that are all vying for the same money or the same staff or the same good. I mean, even in your own backyard, whether it's in Uganda or Alabama or Tennessee, you've got just nonprofits that are doing the same thing. And so, the first answer is don't just start a nonprofit, right? Really take a step back and think about what are the problems you're trying to solve. For me, that Mark Twain quote, I realized, look, this is the day that I found out why I was born, is to do something about this human suffering. And then from there, I just took the next logical step. I mean, we researched, we learned, we did volunteering and served on boards. It was kind of Hemingway talks about. I think someone asked how did he go bankrupt, and he said gradually, then suddenly. And I think that phrase really kind of epitomizes everything we've done. I mean, I think on the surface, it's wow, you've started this new entity and you just did it overnight, and really it was gradually, then suddenly. I mean, everything that we talked about from the personal standpoint led to this endeavor with Mighty Ally, and everything I've done professionally led to this endeavor. And so I would say find out what you're passionate about, right? Find out why you were born. Take the next logical step or steps, however long that might be. Treat it as a gradual then sudden thing. And yeah, the outcome might be joining a nonprofit to work. It might be using your for-profit business for good. I mean, that's a whole nother topic that we're passionate about at Mighty Ally, is how you can use business for good. It might be a social enterprise that kind of blends the two models. I mean, there's a lot of different outcomes, but I think that the key is to really take your time, understand the space, look for gaps in the market, right? And don't just go start something that's already out there. Because if it's already out there, they could probably use you more than they could use you starting something different.
That's fantastic advice. There are 50,000 nonprofits all trying to build wells and water, and they keep popping up because a well-intentioned human that has a heart for getting people water, which is still a huge thing. There are, close to 1 billion people in the world that don't have clean water, anywhere near their home, their place of residence. And so, yes, this is a real thing, but you going through the 501c3 process and getting your website and your team and fundraising and all that, could that be better used? Could your skills and your passion be better serve people if you were to join something that already exists? I think that's a great way to look at it. So don't just go out there and start something just for the hell of it, but also business as a force for good. I mean, because all these things, eradicating, whether it's the water crisis or homelessness or orphans or sex trafficking, any of these things requires mountains of money, right? On top of skill and on top of people and resources and brains and ideas, it requires money. That's just how things work on planet Earth. And so for a lot of these people, I think you're better off, the way you said it, business as a force for good, like going the route of, what are you good at? How can this be used in a way how can you sell a service or a product to somebody, a good service and a good product, make money, build a team, build an actual viable business for your family, and then you're inevitably going to have more money, right? If you're good at what you do, if you really hone in those skills and whatever, you're going to have money that you can now do something with. You can buy your second house or your boat or whatever you want to, or you can use that money to fix the same thing you wanted to start a nonprofit about, 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago. Not that people shouldn't start nonprofits, but it's very limited what charities and nonprofits can do in the long run, because everything they need to do requires money. And if everybody that has a heart for these things just goes and starts another nonprofit, there'll be no money. There's no money, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no better example than, it's a little bit cliche, but look at Bill Gates, right? And
yeah,
he has arguably done more to save lives in the social sector than maybe anyone in history. And he started as a businessman, and I don't know his history from starting Microsoft, but did he ever have in mind that he would start one of the world's most powerful foundations and literally save millions of lives? I doubt it, right? But he used his business value to drive social good. And so I think that's just a great example of how you can be you can change the world by taking different paths, and maybe you do want to start something, and maybe you're an entrepreneur, and I don't want to discourage anyone from starting something. I know we just did a year ago, but we were also entrepreneurs. We had started businesses, and we also saw a major gap in the market, and so that was our path. But whether you join my brother, for example, he's a career guy at a major accounting firm, but he's about to be the chair of the board of a major nonprofit in Austin, Texas. And that's his path for doing good in the world. And he has his day job. He does audit during the day, but quote at night, he gives back by serving on a board. And so there's a lot of different ways to give a damn. And I think a lot of times we see that the knee-jerk reaction is, I need to go start a nonprofit. And that's just generally not the case.
Yeah, in every one of these nonprofit organizations need a board, right? Like I'm glad you mentioned that with your brother. They need a board that has diverse, people bringing diverse skill sets to the table, wealth, wisdom, and all these different things. Like they don't just need, wealthy people on the board or people full of wisdom or people that bring a specific skill set. They need all of those things. So every nonprofit needs a board, and a board that's going to stick with them and help them, raise money and put on events and travel to the field with them. And so again, if all the talented people are begging for money for their new nonprofit they just started, who's serving the other nonprofits that have already, been started and established and going for a while? And so I don't want to shit on nonprofits. Like it might sound like that, but for everybody listening, that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying let's be wise about it, because there are only so many resources. There's only so much money to go around, and so I just want people to think more wisely. I spent a long time, most of my short career so far, 10 plus years in nonprofit world, and I left for that very reason, because I wanted to be a force for good as I build Let's Give a Damn, as I build, these companies that I've already begun, building, plus other things that I have going. Like I want that to be a force for good, in the for-profit space. Let's tackle this for a few minutes. As we begin to wind down here, we've been going for 40 minutes or so. There are a lot of crazy things happening in the world, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. It's easy to feel everything that's going on, so much so that we don't do anything, right? That's why what I just described is exactly why I started Let's Give a Damn, because we can get so overwhelmed with all the atrocities going on. Like within a mile, if I want to have a terrible day, here's what I do. I think that within a mile of my home right now, some wife is getting abused by her husband. Some kid is getting molested. There's human trafficking in some way happening within a mile of my house. Like something terrible is happening really close to me right now. And that's, for everybody listening, that's the case, unless you're out in the middle of a field in Iowa. But for most of us, that's a reality, that like just really bad, evil, shitty things are happening around us, and it can get so overwhelming. And so a lot of people, both people with very little means, both financial means, skill set means, and also very powerful people, resort to thoughts and prayers, right? Yeah. Something terrible happens. Just last week, the US, UK, and Germany collaboratively, bombed, Syria and Damascus and some other areas. And it's so easy to see that and not feel it fully, not really feel that innocent people died there. Wherever you stand on that, on whether or not that should have happened, innocent people were murdered. Innocent people that have suffered through so much over the last few years in Syria were bombed to bits as a result of this thing that just happened, that we helped, that we did, So how do we go, in your opinion, in your experience, how do we go from thoughts and prayers kind of people when a school shooting happens? What are we going to do? Are we going to, lob our thoughts and prayers out there, or are we going to march in the March for Our Lives? Or am I going to take my 6-year-old daughter out of school this Friday on the 20th, for the National School Walkout Day in remembrance of Columbine? Like, am I going to do that and then explain to her? Or am I going to say thoughts and prayers, hope it doesn't happen the next time? So what's your sense? What's your encouragement here? What are some tips and tricks, some wisdom in terms of going from thoughts and prayers kind of people to people of action?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I think the first thing to say is, as this thoughts and prayers meme has sprung up, there's been a whole lot of folks from different religious communities that have said, "Oh, are you saying we shouldn't pray now?" And of course, I mean, if prayer is your thing, pray. Of course, give good thoughts, right? I'm a big believer, and I know as cheesy as it is, the whole butterfly effect, like one good thought could potentially,
Yeah, yeah.
or what right, reverberate around the world. Like I believe in putting good things out into the universe, and they'll be felt by others, and so that is necessary, right? So pray, have good thoughts, but also do something, and that's why there's the meme of after Puerto Rico. You see on the internet an image of an empty truck, and it says your thoughts and prayers have arrived, because thoughts and prayers ultimately, and this might be a belief that others will argue, but it's not going to do anything, right? You've got to use your hands, use your feet, and do something about it. There's this term slacktivism. I don't know if you've heard it, but it was new to me as of a few weeks ago. It's basically, if you like something or sign a petition or share someone's Facebook post, you kind of feel good about yourself, right? And that's you think that that's going to be a supplement for other things you do in the world, but for a lot of people, it's psychology. It's been proven through psychology. It's substituting for people actually doing something out there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to think about this apathy that exists in the world, and I think you and I might have touched on it the first time we spoke. The most incredible example. There's a TED Talk by an Australian philosopher named Peter Singer, and I urge anyone to watch it. It's about effective altruism. And it's fascinating because he shows this video of a 2-year-old girl in China who gets hit by 2 different vans, and a camera catches it, like a security camera catches it. 18 different people walk by this little girl as she's laying in the street. And of course, you watch this and you're just mortified. And during the TED Talk, he has everyone raise their hand, and he says, who would have stopped and done something? Everyone raises their hand. And then he says, well, not so fast. He says 6.9 million children died this year from preventable diseases, 19,000 just today. Does it matter that we're not walking in front of them in the street?
Wow.
So I think we've just really got to check ourselves. And I think it goes back to this idea, like Mother Teresa had this quote about, she says, if I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at one, I will. And I think that's the idea, is like, just start somewhere, because it is overwhelming, right? I mean, you look at 147 million orphans and you don't know what to do about it, but you just dig in and take that next logical step. And you might end up with a couple of kids in your family through adoption or through fostering, or you might end up, serving on the board of an organization that deals with orphan care. But it's just doing something. It's taking that next logical step, because thoughts and prayers aren't enough. Sharing on Facebook isn't enough. Honestly, donating isn't even enough. I mean, we need action beyond those measures.
Yeah, that's really great. Slacktivism. I am going to add that to my vocabulary. But it's so true. Anyone sitting in that room, anybody listening, you, me, us sitting in that TED Talk, we're saying, no, I would never walk by her, right? That's unconscionable that would happen. And it's like, no, but we do that every single day. By our, we retweet stuff and we give a few dollars here and there. I'm leading a 6K for water for World Vision on May 19th, along with tens of thousands of people around the world, right? And that's great that I'm going to get a few dozen people to give $50, hopefully, to this race, and we can walk 6K and do all that. But that's the beginning step. That's the first step. But I like how you ended there. That's the thing, is taking the very first step. Like, it seems, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Like we have to just get going. We have to get our engine going, which then, once we start moving, we feel better about it. We feel more confident about it. But as long as we're standing still, physically, mentally, emotionally, then it just feels like overwhelming. But then we get going, then we get moving. Things start to happen.
Yeah, that's where progress is made. I mean, this same TED Talk, Peter Singer, I'd urge anyone to look it up. He talks about why people don't do anything and why they walk past girls on the street, and figuratively. And some people worry about the difference they can make in the world. Some people worry about time. Some people think charities aren't effective. I mean, that's where there's a lot of different ways to do good without just a traditional charity model. And look, the takeaway is, we've talked about nonprofits and social enterprises. We've talked about thoughts and prayers and money and doing something. I mean, the truth is, it takes it all, right? I mean, we're still dealing with so many significant social problems, whether it's in your own backyard or around the world. And it takes it all. And there's another quote, sorry, I'm a king of quotes, but there's a quote about all those little bits of good that will add up to really change the world. And that's my belief, right? Is it's going to take nonprofits here and there. It's going to take social enterprises. It's going to take brands. It's going to take people donating, people praying, people doing little bits of good, people doing lots of bits of good. And that's the takeaway is you just got to find your place in the world. And I think that's what I get passionate about is even if your piece is small, that's something. And if you're heading in the right direction, that's something. But unfortunately, there are a whole lot of folks that aren't doing anything. And I think that's what's really bringing us down as a society is we've got a lot of dead weight, so to speak, and a lot of kind of untapped potential, right? You could look at it negatively and say you're a lot of people sitting on their ass, or you could look at it as untapped potential. And that's my belief is if you could get all that brain power and all that, even just arm power kind of headed in the right direction to do good in the world, man, I think we'd be unstoppable as a people.
I agree. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you hoped I would?
Not in a 30-minute span. I've got a lot to talk about,
right.
But no, I think, this is all big stuff and there's no way to cover it all in a 30, 60-minute span. And I think that's just what's so powerful about just any sort of this work is just having these conversations. And I think that's what's going to make the world a better place and give a lot of people a start is just talking about it. Right. And nobody's figured out racism. Nobody's figured out how to end poverty yet. But I think just having these conversations and giving a damn, that's where it really all starts.
Well, we'll do this again in a few months. We'll do a round 2. A Kevin Brown returns to the podcast edition because I think you're onto stuff. You've obviously gone many steps beyond where most people do, and for that I'm grateful. And just in terms of giving a damn, and like I think what you said about I could talk forever about the adoption thing because that's we had a failed adoption at first and then got pregnant right away, and we've had 3 kids since, and we still want to adopt or foster, and we're trying to figure out how to do that well. So your thoughts on that are very important to me, and the fact that you are there, and I know you said right now you don't have a choice, right? Because there's still a lot to work through, but the fact that that's part of your heart is like, why would we take them out of their land, out of their home to take them to our place? Like that doesn't make any sense. And I agree with you in a lot of ways. And so I love that. Last big question here. This question is one that I ask every guest. The scenario is this: you're going to die someday. Hopefully it's many, many years from now, lots of damn giving years from now, but you're going to die. The hypothetical part of this scenario is that I get asked to give your eulogy. So all of your kids, your wife, your family, friends, all the people you've helped throughout the years, they're all there in this huge room to honor your life and legacy, to celebrate your life and legacy. And again, for some odd reason, I've been asked to give your eulogy. What do you hope that I would say on that day?
Man, good question. I should have done my homework so I could have thought more about this one. But yeah, it's funny. I actually have been thinking a little bit. My birthday this summer, I did the math. There's a guy that does videos and wears a T-shirt for how the percentage of his life that he's lived. And this birthday for me this summer will be technically 50% based on life expectancy. And if you want to get a kick in the pants to do something in life, just do the math on how much percentage you have left. So yeah, with a eulogy, man, that's tough. I think it's largely what we've talked about, but I think for me, hard work is probably the most important thing that I have cared about in my life and want to pass on to my kids. I think I always say that you're probably not going to be the smartest. You're definitely not probably going to be the best looking or the fastest. All these superlatives, but I think this idea of just being able to just work your tail off for what you know is right, doing the right thing and working your tail off. I mean, I would hope that's the way that I'm remembered. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and I know I will continue to make plenty of mistakes. But I think nobody would doubt that I've worked hard for what I believe in, and so I think that's how I want to be remembered is for kind of planting a flag in the ground around some things that I believe in, and just working my ass off to try to make it happen. And I think if I'm remembered for nothing else but hard work, then that won't be a bad life.
I love it. I agree. Where can people, if they're interested in just finding out more about the work you do or wanting to follow up or keep in touch or whatever the case may be, what are some links, some URLs? Just what do you want people to take away from our time today?
Yeah, I mean, for Mighty Ally, it's pretty simple. It's mightyally.org. And we've got a blog there. We've got some social links, and we're always talking about these subjects. And my email address is on there too. So if anyone hears this and wants to reach out, I mean, it's cheesy as it sounds, it does take a village, whether it's in the professional life or personal life. And we've been kind of blessed to be able to provide a little bit of a ministry, for lack of better words, to those kind of in the adoption community that might have been going through some things that we went through. And then also in the professional world, we're out there to try to help. So hit me up if there's anything I can do, and I'd be glad to help.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for those listening, I truly want you to take him up on that. I mean, even if I know a lot of the people listening are nonprofit or social enterprise founders, which is really cool that a lot of people have started to listen and that are leading projects, running projects. I'm so sure that Mighty Ally can help you if there's a good partnership there. So hit Kevin up. I know that he would probably love to dialogue with you about this. I'm also going to link to the TED Talk that he mentioned earlier on, and a post that I really liked that I'll link to in the show notes as well, laying the foundation for social enterprise success, 5 startup principles from the making of Mighty Ally. I'm going to link to that as well. That's an article that Kevin wrote last autumn. And so all that'll be in the show notes, including social media links and URLs and all that. Kevin, thank you so much for taking time from 9:30 to 10:30 p.m. Kampala, Uganda time. Thank you so much for joining me. This was super great.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me. And yeah, hit me up, anyone. I will stake the claim that I will respond personally to anyone who sends me a personal email at any time. I'm not big enough by any means to not reply or to not help out a fellow man or fellow woman. So hit me up anytime.
I love that. Thanks so much.
All right, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Friends, thank you so much for joining me once again for another amazing conversation, this time with Kevin Brown, CEO and co-founder of Mighty Ally. I hope that you will let them and him know if you enjoyed our conversation. mightyally.org. You can contact them through that. You can also hit up their growing social media presence. Go follow them, encourage them. They're doing good work, and I'm excited to keep up with the work they're doing. I hope you will too. As we wrap up, we started a group on Facebook. I've mentioned it a couple times. I won't keep doing it, but I wanted to make sure you hear about this. We started a private Facebook group that is meant for the members of that group to encourage each other, to challenge each other toward giving more dams. And so it's called Damn Good People. You can search for it, Damn Good People. If you are not a crazy person, or if you are not looking to start trouble, I will most likely let you in. Inside, you'll find people sharing different stories they come across, find things that inspire them. For me, it's an encouragement. It's a more focused way of sharing good news and people that are giving a damn. So if you want to join us, do that. And if you want to do one thing to make me very happy this week, if making me happy is on your radar in any way, shape, or form, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Those reviews help more than you know. For one, it gives us credibility, and so many people have left incredible reviews already. We would love to see more on there. Don't lie, but give us a 5-star review, and that'll help us continue to do what we're doing. You can check out all show notes and more information about these podcasts at letsgiveadamn.com. And I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for joining me. I love you all.